I am so happy to meet you all, and so happy to be introducing yourself to each other, to myself, and to the Memory Lab model at DC Public Library, along with other models that are out there that we've learned about and that have developed over the years. So once again, my name is Siobhan Hagan. I'm the Memory Lab Network Project Manager at DC Public Library. And there's my email right there. And I'll be sending you all slides as well. This is generously provided, the Memory Lab Network is generously provided through funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services through a National Leadership Grant. So thank you so much to IMLS. If you hear me say IMLS, that's who I'm referring to. Okay, so the first model that I'm going to start out talking about is the Memory Lab model at DC Public Library. And this is an on-site model, so more of a stationary embedded model in the public library. So for our origin story at DC Public Library, there was much, like you all mentioned, public demand for digitization, and not just for scanning of photos and things like that, but absolutely for video and audio. There were already partnerships happening between Special Collections, which is now called People's Archive, and the DCPL Labs department, due to digital education, archives expertise, and then the DCPL Labs has more tools, and then education around software, computers, and things to make things particularly. So the real thing that got our Memory Lab started was a National Digital Stewardship resident funding that funded the resident Jamie Mears, who came and worked at DC Public Library for a year in June 2015 to May 2016. And then Jamie kept a blog of her experience, and that's where you can find that. That's still up. And then from that, the result was a Memory Lab, and not just the lab, not just the physical digitization lab and space, but also online resources and physical resources and classes and programming. So there's Jamie. And I also have Jamie's final report linked there. And this is also, Jamie was when they got their badge, and she got to, she was working in the MLK Central Branch, Martin Luther King Jr. Library Central Branch of the DC Public Library, but that was 2015 was before it was renovated. So the Memory Lab has definitely had a journey, literally and figuratively, over the years that I'll be talking about. But here's all the work that Jamie went through in order to come out with the model that we have at DC Public Library. And so here's the physical space. And this is particularly the first iteration of the Memory Lab that Jamie created. And so here are the formats that were available to the public. I'll just let you guys read those, but basically a good mix of audio-visual formats, and then digital external media with the floppy disk, and then providing a high quality equipment for scanning of transparencies and photographs and things like that. And so actually, by the time we closed in 2020, March of 2020 for the pandemic, the lab had over 4,000 hours that it was used by the public since it opened in February 20. So just for about 4 years. And it had been closed a few times within that for moving and things like that. So just within like 1,000 hours a year, almost. So here, just want to show you, this was before the renovation of the MLK library. The Memory Lab was located in our digital commons. So it's sort of like it had walls of sort of like a enclosure within the digital commons, and it had like glass walls that Jamie created these really cool like microfilm curtains. So it had a little bit of privacy, but you could kind of see through them a little bit. So it was in that space, but in a pretty public area, people could see it, ask what it was. But then it moved because they were closing the central branch for renovations for several years. So it was moved in 2017. It was only open about a year at the central branch, and it was moved to our Northeast neighborhood library branch, which it then existed within the computer lab, the general computer lab area. So that's like the main computer lab right there where you see all the computers. Can't really see it too much, but there's right here, there's the main reference desk. And then over here is where the memory lab, this right here, was located along the wall. And we had 2 stations, one for scanning, one for audiovisual or digital media. And then here's the lab now. It's in a very long space, so it's hard to get a good photo of it in the post renovation of the MLK Library Central Branch. And it's in our labs department, has the lower level. The entire lower level is all labs equipment and offices. So this is off in a little a few like offices rooms that have the podcast recording center and other like media production, the studio lab kind of things, and then the memory lab, because they're mostly related. So now we've moved from 2 stations to back to having 1 station. So especially this is post the pandemic, because we moved into the renovated space in the summer of the summer of 2020. And only just opened up again this past June within that space. So having fewer people in there was the name of the game. So just having 1 station was the best way to use the space and the equipment. And then we have been able, thanks to funding from IMLS through the Memory Lab Network project, we've added a few formats recently. The silent Super 8mm motion picture film scanning, and then adding in video 8, high 8, and digital 8. They're part of the 8mm video family. So we added film and video 8mm into our workflow. So that's been great. And that was specifically because I wanted to come up with workflows for the network, not just for our lab, but for the network, because so many folks were asking, like, what do I do next? You know, our community has needs of motion picture film. They need, you know, or other things. So we're trying to kind of get as much documentation in place for you all to expand beyond the firm foundation that we're going to start for you. But then from there, should you get funding, things like that, we want to have all the workflows set out, and for you to be able to be ready and go should you get some funding to buy the equipment to add these into your workflows and into your memory lab. So we have online resources that I already had you all look through for your homework this week. And this is our LibGuides. I have the URL at the top, sort of hidden there, but this is our LibGuide for our memory lab. We sort of have 2 online spaces, but this is where our resources are specifically stored and available for the public, which is mostly under resources, but our guidelines and like how basically just step-by-step walk through transferring things is in the lab tab, and then further resources for folks to learn more about what to do with their content, what to do with their original materials to better preserve it. And then of course, if you want to build a memory lab, that's sort of what started the whole network, was putting this info out there and people asking a lot of questions about it. So then we also, while we have our LibGuide with all the resources, then we also have the online sign up, like where people go to sign up for an appointment, sign release form, and things like that. So just wanted to show our Build a Memory Lab tab there. So you can see our new one computer station for our memory lab, and we have more, listed out our equipment, which somebody mentioned that they took a look at, and that yes, a lot of it is unfortunately not available anymore because we built the lab in 2016, 2015, and it's amazing how quickly technology becomes obsolete. I think we all know and have experienced through smartphones like how frustrating that can be, how quickly technology can become obsolete, and how expensive as well. So we're working on the sustainability aspect, and it's not easy and it's frustrating, but it's doable. So, and you're not alone, remember that. Then of course, so we've got the space and the online resources, and then the third part to a memory lab is the programming. So these are just photos from like a home movie day at the bottom, and then an event that was held in the central branch launching the memory lab. And so we have classes: Digital Preservation 101, Digital Legacy and Estate Planning, Archiving Social Media, Preserving Your Home Movies. And then also other events that maybe have less like knowledge sharing of classes, but they are celebrating the community and celebrating these memories. And some examples of those are Home Movie Day, Zine Fests, any preservation workshops. Maybe there's a conference that's happening in town that you can hold an event at. And of course, community scanning days, which it was great to hear that a lot of you have done this already and have experience with that or are starting that up. Oh, and then I wanted to mention that we also have this is the physical handouts that we have online. I've been building out this like personal archiving zine library on our website. So we have 4 zines that we've created that specifically are all about preservation topics that you can just print out. The wonderful thing about zines is you can just print it out on a printer, black and white printer, and just cut the right things here, fold the right way there, and then you can just hand it out. So it's a pretty cheap way to get some things out there. And if you want physical stuff, I like to hand these out at events, at classes. People think they're great and they have good information in there. A lot of like further resources go here. And then of course, it's also advertising or marketing and outreach for the memory lab to hopefully get folks interested in coming in and using the lab too, or taking a class. Our lab is basically, so here's a screenshot of that website where you go to make an appointment. It is do it yourself. This is a very big key part of a memory lab. And we have a central reservation system that it's booked through. And this is once again through our labs department already had all this set up. So we just kind of like jumped on board with that. There used to be drop-in sessions twice weekly. And I didn't really love that they were called drop-ins. They were more orientations because you still had to sign up for them. You couldn't just kind of drop. I mean, they would let you, but it was ideal to know because there could only be a max of 4 people in these orientations. And it was basically an hour long, one on a Wednesday, one on every other Saturday, I believe. And for folks with different schedules. And that was for people who were nervous. They weren't required though. So that's something to think about is, are you going to require an orientation, which now we've actually moved more towards that requiring of an orientation, or at least sitting with the librarian first and getting a full like walkthrough so that you're set up, ready to go, and then you'll have less questions as you like go along through it. So it's something to think about. And then a huge thing you have to put out there is that users are responsible for their digital storage. So taking their files with them, they will be deleted. There's waivers they have to sign, a waiver they have to sign and check in upon arrival at labs. And then an exit questionnaire. We have sort of more of one that's sort of just like a basic survey of how was everything. And then we have another one that's very optional that is sort of like asking for more demographic information that I think would be great to have, but you know, it's very skewed because it all depends on who fills it out. Staffing and sustainability is huge. So as someone mentioned, having 3 staff members is even great, even better than 2. But really, I think having 2 people focused is really the minimum. Focused on the lab is the minimum that you should have, because labs or the lab staff or the staff on the memory lab do so much. So for us, our lab staff manage appointments, troubleshoot equipment. They teach the classes, many of the classes, but then there's one librarian specifically who is in charge of the memory lab. And that used to be, so I have pictured here, on the right is Robert and on the left is B. And so actually Robert used to be the librarian who was in charge of the memory lab for several years, and then got a job in our People's Archive as a digital initiatives librarian. Yeah. And or digital curation librarian. And then B moved into that role because she had been actually really involved in this SMART goal program that I wanted to mention down here at the bottom there, where DCPL has this really unique system, and every year you have to sign up for a SMART goal. Every staff member has to sign up for a SMART goal, and one that stands for like specific, measurable, something. And it's basically professional development to make sure that people are learning more things about different departments within DCPL or different branches, and are just basically learning and growing, and everyone's talking more to each other, and getting different opportunities. So B was a adult services librarian at one of our branches and signed up for the digital preservation SMART goal. And so that's where, and we've had multiple librarians sign up for that. And basically they commit to, they get training from the memory lab librarian. They get training from them on how to hold classes, specifically the programming, like digital preservation 101, home movies, preserving your home movies, things like that. And then they take those classes to their branches, or they go to a senior center like in their neighborhood, and bring the classes out to the public across branches, across the whole system. So that's how we got B. B was like, just signed up for it and then loved it and was so great at it. And then now B is the memory lab librarian in charge of the memory lab in the labs department. So then we also have a working group that consists of labs, staff members, People's Archive, so that's our special collections, and then other branch, so people who might be in the SMART goal, who just are really interested and want to stay involved or particularly passionate about it. And so staffing, also a huge part and a huge challenge is the troubleshooting that staff members have to have. So they have to have more training in order to know and understand how to troubleshoot the memory lab. Always have, the way that we do outreach and promotion at DCPL, we've absolutely integrated into existing library activities and our interests of our community. We're lucky to have a communications department, so we work with them on press releases and events through the head of adult services as well. So these are just examples of different types of events you could have. And of course, trying to get media coverage as much as possible, having quality information out on your library webpage. I love postcards, handing out postcards that just have like frequently asked questions and the location of the lab at any event, and have them at various branches and things like that. And then of course we have these zines that I mentioned, the preservation zines that we can hand out for outreach and promotion. Partnerships are huge. I just want to say I'm so excited. You all have great partnerships that I'm so excited to hear more about. And yeah, so that's like, I'm so excited about that. And that's definitely a huge strength. So lean into that. These are just a list of us being in DC. We're able to have some really unique partnerships, like with various Smithsonians and various other like genealogy, historical societies, an art house cinema, the Sun Cinema there, where we've held home movie days there. So we've sort of taken home movie day on the road to Sun Cinema. And told people, you know, just very briefly handed out zines and told them about the memory lab and told them to come in and preserve their memories. And then of course, collecting. So I know a lot of you have thoughts and ideas about collecting. That's from folks who are using the memory lab, the local history, the collective memory. But so that's not really our main focus. The main focus is education and access to the equipment, helping people preserve their content for themselves, their memories for themselves. But also it's, you know, something to consider that probably not, at least for DCPL, a lot of people are not from DC who might be coming in to use the lab. A lot of people who live in DC didn't grow up there necessarily, or have DC documentation, which is what we collect. So the materials that people bring into the lab might not be within our scope or within your scope. So we just want to make sure that users are educated about their options. We mention that there is a possibility, if you would like to donate to anything that you digitize to the special collections, People's Archive. We have this very outdated poster that's still in the lab. We really need to update this. But basically we just have it in the lab, have it in the exit survey, and sort of like take it out to community scanning days too, and just say like, potentially, if you're interested and you have something that's DC history related, please contact People's Archive, and then it goes from there. But nothing has really come of that. So interested to hear how you all are going to handle that. Then we have other on-site memory lab models I want to talk about really quickly. And these are from our first cohort. Yes, these are our first cohort memory labs. Los Angeles Public Library on the left, New Ulm, Minnesota in the middle, and Pueblo City County Public Library in Colorado on the right. And so as you can see, your memory lab, your on-site memory lab can look really different. I also want to mention Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh has their recollection studio. It's do-it-yourself. It's a do-it-yourself digitalization lab by appointment for the public, but then also it serves as an internal digitalization studio for the library's special collections. So they're doing a lot. They regularly have staff in there as well as the public. And the staff is in there just doing their, scanning their collections. So that's an interesting way to look at it. That's not how we necessarily use it. And every now and again, we might put a VHS, digitize a VHS there or something, but typically not going to use it for that. Then there's Queens College Library Memory Lab. This is in partnership from the college library and the Queens Public Library, their Queens Memory Project, which is an amazing project that I recommend looking at. It's reminding me, I'm getting similar vibes from Tacoma and your community archives work. So this is very specifically for, there are appointments available for people who are part of the university, students, alumni, things like staff. But then also they have every now and again, they will schedule like a community archive to come in, or a specific group through the library to come in and digitize their archives or their stuff and open it up every now and again to the public. So it's not quite a full public library DIY lab. It's very much in the college library. And I want to mention that California is starting has started their own sort of memory lab network, where they've used our documentation we put out there, and they're giving funding to, and it is also IMLS state funding, out to build memory labs across the state. So the biggest difference for them is that they have more of a focus on collecting, because that's actually what the group California Revealed, which is the state entity that is in charge of the training and doling up the money and helping with purchasing and things like that. So they're very much about more about collecting. So I wanted to kind of put that out there as a really interesting model. And then the other thing that's really interesting about it is that they include money for staff as part of that grant. So you can use so they have more in the budget for folks, and they can use that to hire like a part-time person to get the lab up and running potentially. And then also it's just a 1-year turnaround, so it's really quick, and that's tough. I'm seeing because I've been following along very closely with them. So it seems like just basically like they pick people, they train them, they have to buy their stuff, and they have to open the lab, and then they do it all over again. So it's a lot of work for them, but it's great to see that so many labs are being open in California. So then I'm going to mention some mobile memory lab models. There's the University of Wisconsin, has the Pravda and the RAD and the Proud kits. So these are mailable rescue kits for obsolete digital media and obsolete AV media. And there's detailed documentation online, which is very much what we have used and sort of to create our own, which I'll talk about in a minute. We also were very much inspired by the Frederick County Public Library, which is Frederick County, Maryland. It's actually where I went to high school, not very far from DC. So have been able to visit them, and they've been able to visit us and bring their equipment. And so this is basically you can see in the top, the top photo that's how big the lab is. And they do VHS as well as scanning at basically, they're very rural. So they have, they'll take the mobile lab to a branch and have it there for like a week or two, and then have folks sign up for appointments at the branch. And then they'll move it to a new branch and just sort of have this steady rotation because they have limited staff, and they have, it's just so spread out that they want to be sure that they're reaching everyone. We recorded this webinar way back in 2018, I think, on digitization pop-ups and holding them. And we had folks more from, and this would be great for Tacoma folks to maybe meet up with these folks that are more up in your area, but from the preservation or the moving image preservation of Puget Sound, MePops is their acronym. And from the Washington State University Libraries and KEXP, which is a NPR station out there. So this is sort of like just talking about how we all have held pop-up digitization events. And it's sort of like a hybrid of making the public do it, but then really kind of a lot of hand holding. So that's just, I recommend, I have the link there. You can watch that and learn more about that. And then so all of these have sort of inspired how we're trying to design our mobile memory lab. So we have different options for what your needs of your community are, and maybe we'll come up with a fourth one if we discover something that's needed. It's all about keeping it light and keeping it cheap. But then you want to make sure that you have everything you need. So we have 3 different options. Those are URLs there that you can click on to see the shopping list, which I have to regularly update. So just keep that in mind, that it needs to always be updated. And then I do want to say that we're testing out a lot of this. We haven't fully tested out all the equipment for the mobile lab, but we have finally in March, I was able to get out to Karuk tribal libraries in Northern California, and they are having a mobile memory lab because they have 2 locations that are about an hour apart from each other, and they're very rural. So it needs to travel between both locations. So I have a picture there of just some of the more, I have a rack that's sort of like in a carry case that you can carry over your shoulder. And then a lot of these Pelican cases, which is the bottom photo from LA Public Library, has a mobile memory lab as well, but they don't do AV, it's just for scanning. And that's focusing very much on collecting and putting stuff into their collections. For mobile memory labs, the main thing is like all the challenges are the same for a stationary lab, but then there's more issues. So it takes more time because you have to set up, you have to break everything down, you have to make sure everything's in there, make sure everything's working. When you have to take the time to travel, what if there's, what if there's, if you're shipping things, ooh, that sounds very frightening, but then what if there's traffic and an accident? Think about how, having insurance and workers liability and things like that. Things have outside, think about if you're doing something outside, even if it's gorgeous out, like what if it rains, what if it's too humid, like this equipment should not be in a very hot environment. And then you're not getting as much output because you're using all this time to set up and break down and do all this other stuff. So you're not able to give as many appointments. And then because it all has to happen in real time, especially for AV, there's increased failure and troubleshooting because you keep breaking things down and, setting them right back up. So the more that you're unplugging and plugging, the more that something can break. So there's more possibility for damage also because you're moving things. But then there's an increased chance that you'll plug something in wrong and you'll be like, oh, what did I do? So things to keep in mind. There's also a curbside memory lab model that someone tried out during the pandemic. This isn't in our network, but part of the California Revealed network. And this is the Los Gatos library. And it was just basically people would drop off a shopping bag's worth, which I'm like, oh, that's scary to me. And a storage device, a digital storage device. And they would sign their liability waiver and all that. And then they gave themselves a lot of time of 6 weeks for them to pick it up later. And then they fill out a survey. So that's not really ideal to us because a big part of the Memory Lab is teaching folks how to use the equipment and giving them these skills and understanding how fragile our archives are. But this is definitely something to consider maybe in the world that we live in. And if there's ever a need to shut things down and you need staff to be able to do more curbside things for your patrons. So strategic partnerships, as I mentioned, are huge. Really leverage those. And there is an overwhelming need for these services in literally every community. That's why we're here. This shouldn't be a privilege. So keep that, at the forefront when you're feeling really, like you have a headache because you're tired of troubleshooting and things aren't working. Just remember that you're doing good work and that this is really important. Public libraries are a great space to put these because they already have all this sort of like mission and programming. It's already there. It's already built in, trust with community and things like that. So, digitization is not enough. Classes aren't enough. We need to be able to really give support, ongoing support. So this is going to create like a community of folks who want their stuff preserved. And preservation doesn't stop, it's ongoing. So you're going to be a hub, like the Memory Lab is going to be a hub for questions for people to just keep trying to have access to their personal archives. So teach the critical thinking, the digital literacy, tools will change, but concepts won't. So evaluating things and critical thinking, that's really that's the name of the game. And personal digital archiving is still so new. So sharing information is really important. And every community is different, but a lot of the challenges and strengths are very similar. A lot of the challenges specifically are very similar. So I'm just going to run really quickly through the Memory Lab network. I joined because I'm the Memory Lab network partner. I actually joined a year on into the grant. I'm the project manager, and I took over for someone else who started out the first year, Lorena Ramirez Lopez, and then I took over in 2018. So I've been here for 4 years. And the Memory Lab network, as I mentioned, is funded through IMLS's National Leadership Grant Program, through DC Public Library. And I just wanted to show the folks, this is Hear Me with the folks that started it all, Lauren Algie, Jamie Mears in the middle there, the NDSR resident, and then Nick Koralchik, who's my boss and the project director of the Memory Lab network. And Nick was the head of the labs when Lauren Algie was working in our Special Collections People's Archive, and they are the two that came up with the idea to write the NDSR and have an NDSR fellowship. So their work got Jamie on board, and then Jamie's work got me on board eventually along with their work. So this is the team that started it all. And it, as I mentioned, is very much teamwork. So all of these blue dots represent our MemLab network official, well, all of the light blue dots represent our official network. And then the darker blue dots represent the other public do-it-yourself free labs, memory labs out there that have been built in the last like 4 years. This map was like not exist. I've been keeping track of it since I started 4 years ago. And there has been a dramatic increase. There's somewhere around like 70 now, whereas like there were like 2 when we first started. So, or 3 maybe. So welcome, and you're in good company, and you're not going to do this alone. The main thing we're going to have you do is we're going to have you have the foundation of your lab is going to be VHS. So having all the flavors of VHS available to your community, because that's it. I mean, we heard 2 people right today say that that's a community need. So we're going to focus on that, because once you got that down, you can add things in. And then of course the photo and document scanning. So you can see the scanner there, the really nice big Epson one. That's like half of our budget is that piece of equipment anyway. So those are the core elements. And I'm just writing it out. So what exactly each main piece of equipment is. Then there's cables and things that have to connect everything. But these are all the things you're going to learn what these are. You don't have to know them right now. Equipment is going to come through a lot of different ways. We're going to get you started very soon asking for donations of equipment, because people have those consumer VHS decks in their garages, in their basements. Now's the time before they throw them away, because it's really, really hard to find this equipment due to all of these issues: low stock, low availability, discontinued items, things are no longer manufactured. We have issues with what vendors we can purchase through. Are you working in a Windows or a Mac environment? Is your IT going to support you if you decide to go Mac when they're all Windows? Think about once again, how mobile you want things, how much it will cost to, sustain, and shipping of things is always an ordeal, as you can see here, where we got some CRT monitors donated for free, which was great, but then we shipped it using not a great shipping method, and it got damaged, unfortunately, and this is like an irreplaceable thing. So your space is really big, as we heard in the challenges. It's a big deal, and here's all different things that you should consider. We can go into this more in a lot of the homework and things that you guys are going to be doing, but this is the basic idea of what you need to look for, what you need to think about. And I think you all have already, and it seems like everybody has an idea of where their space is approximately, or maybe more specifically. So, and it might change, and that's okay. And just to know that MemLab Networks labs, all the labs in our network are beautiful snowflakes, each individual and unique, but they all have similarities where they're a balancing act between scalability, how you want to balance your work, how much staff you have with how much equipment, what your needs of community are, compatibility of technology, how much funding you have, how much you need to move it around, how much you're able to move it around, and then also like what kind of quality are you going to provide, and how do we get that level of quality? How do we teach people the difference between quality of their audio visual and scanning of photos and things like that? So these are all similar challenges, but you're all very unique and all going to have a wonderful lab. Your community is going to be very, very happy.